familiar to you, and I think the bandsaw probably falls into that category. You've all probably used the bandsaw at the middle school level, so you're probably familiar with it. So we're going to go through these significantly quicker. I did get a couple of years, last year I got a picture from one of my best friends who's a wood teacher in Forest Lake, and it was a picture of a student that had cut 3 fingers off on the bandsaw. So accidents can still happen on the bandsaw, and I want you to be very careful with this. Yes, I'll show you how it happened in a moment. Yes.
How do you get a picture? Is he just like, oh crap, he just cut his fingers off?
Before we called the hospital.
No, the student sent the picture to the teacher from the hospital, and then the teacher sent that picture to me.
Did you just keep
Do you have the picture?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, yes, that, I'll show you how it happened. I'll show you how it happened,
You just-
and I'll show you how we want to avoid that.
You
So,
should just tape that picture right there.
number 1, roll up any loop sleeves, tie back long hair, tuck in necklaces and hoodie strings. Pretty self-explanatory rule. It's those hoodie strings that get us. Number 2, never have your hand or any part of your body in the line of cut. We have 3 bandsaws in the shop. This one, there's one over there that's yellow, and there's one big one over here that's green and yellow. And on that one, there is a line going right through the table, straight in front of the blade. These other 2 have them coming out the side. Why do you think we have these? What is this for, this split in the table?
The blade.
The blade? Speak more to that.
The blade does not break.
Like all this.
It has to do with the blade, but this is how we change the blade. Because if there was just a hole in the middle of the table, we couldn't get the blade out. So we have to have a slot somewhere in the table so we can put a new blade in when it does break or gets dull and we need to change it. But let's imagine there's a line right down the middle. And that line, I don't want your hand to cross that line. Get in the habit, so if I needed to grab something over here, I wouldn't use my left hand, I would just use my right hand to grab it. I don't want anything in that line of cut because we just can't predict what's going to happen in class. So if somebody trips and bumps into you, we don't want them knocking you into the blade on the bandsaw. So don't have your hands or anything like that in the line of cut. Number 3, keep hands at least 3 inches away from the blade at all times. Use a push stick when cutting smaller stock, or if you need to maneuver something, don't get your hands that close, grab a scrap piece of wood. So back to that 3-inch rule. Remember, the miter saw was 4 inches, and that's the only saw in the shop that is not 3. Number 4, and this is how this student in Forest Lake cut their fingers. Keep the adjustable guide within a 1/2 inch of the material that you are cutting. So this is the adjustable guide. We can change it by loosening this screw in the back and moving this up and down. So this is how that student in Forest Lake got hurt. They were going to go and cut this board, but they were going to cut it like this. And he got it, he started cutting, and then all of a sudden it flipped up, and it drove those fingers into the blade. So that's how you remove 3 fingers.
No.
The good news is they were able to reattach them, but his dream of playing flamenco guitar is probably gone. Yes. So it is unfortunate that we have lost a musician. But he did get his fingers back. I'm just trying to save you from going through that process, and I think that we all want to avoid that. So make sure that's the most commonly broken safety rule on the bandsaw. Just make sure that we're about a 1/2 inch. And it's like we talked about the table saw and those teeth. I'm not going to get a tape measure and come over here and check you guys. It's a general rule. So generally speaking, keep that about a 1/2 inch up. This way you have to cut the fingers off one at a time. It takes a little bit longer, and you can usually stop. Above the board, yep. So the space right here is about a 1/2. Just a little high, but I'm not going to get that picky. Number 5, bandsaws are for wood only. You must receive my permission to cut something other than, is that your iPad?
That's broken.
Is it broken? Is it broken?
Wait, 5 is wood only?
Oh, it was closed. You're good.
5 is wood only?
Yes, 5 is wood only. Now, that's true in this classroom. If we go and look at a butcher shop, what does a butcher use to cut up a cow?
Cleaver.
A bandsaw.
Okay.
They have this exact same setup, but it's a meat saw, a meat cutting bandsaw. Now, they have a different blade on there, and the motor spins a little different rate, but it's generally the same saw. They make bandsaws to cut just about any material that you can come across. Whether it's metal, wood, meat, plastic, tungsten carbide. They make bandsaws that can cut just about any material. Now, what do you think the difference would be between a metal cutting bandsaw and a wood cutting bandsaw?
Metal one's stronger.
What's stronger on it?
The blade.
The blade is a different blade, that's for sure. How about how fast it spins? Do you think a metal cutting bandsaw spins faster or slower?
Faster. No, slower, because so that it doesn't
Wreck the blade.
wreck a blade.
Yeah, it moves significantly slower. So before I came to Wayzata, I was a metals teacher in Forest Lake. I had a bandsaw that could switch between metal and wood cutting. One, we had to change the blade. A metal cutting bandsaw blades are pretty expensive because they're actually bi-metal, meaning there's two different types of metal in the blade. The teeth are one, and the actual guts of the blade are something different. So those are about $70 a piece to buy, 50 to 70, depending on the brand. These ones are about $9 to $10 a piece, so they're significantly cheaper. The speed at which it travels is also way different. So this spins about, actually this one is 1,720 RPMs. So almost 2,000 times a minute this is going to spin in a circle. When we cut on a metal cutting bandsaw, we're at about 200. So or about 10 times slower on a metal cutting bandsaw. This is much less forgiving though. If you touch it and it's going that fast, you're certainly going to have to get some stitches. You're not going to get away without getting stitches. But I did get my finger in a metal cutting bandsaw, and while it hurt and was not an experience I wish any of you, it did not require stitches. I touched the tip of my thumb, I got a cut, I had to put a Band-Aid on it, and then just be tough for a couple of days. So it was not the worst thing in the world, but the wood cutter, I would have been going to the doctor for sure to get some stitches. Number 6, stand on the left side of the bandsaw when operating. If the blade breaks, it could come out on this right side. I've seen it happen one time. Depending on where the blade breaks, how many of you have had a bandsaw blade break on you? It happens. It's not because you were, well, it could have been because you were using it wrong, but more than likely, it's just the life cycle of a bandsaw blade. They break over time. It's not something that lasts forever. So if you break one, you don't have to feel like you're a bad person or you've done something wrong. It just breaks. That's okay. I've seen it happen once where the blade must have broken about right here because the broken part hit the table and kind of shot out this side. So you're not going to want to stand right here waiting for somebody and have the blade break and come out at you. Again, very freak thing. It's probably never going to happen again, but it could happen. So by taking these steps now, we're avoiding being the topic of a story I get to tell next term when somebody didn't follow the rules. Number 7, do not cut sharp curves. If necessary, use relief cuts. And that picture on your handout does a pretty good job of showing relief cuts. This is what I'm going to eventually demo you later on today. Well, let's say I want to cut out this North Stars logo. This is a relief cut here. These are relief cuts here. It's a rectangular blade, and if we're trying to cut out something circular, we need to make sure that every time we get to this relief cut, the blade can straighten out and it relieves the pressure on the blade. Because if we're just trying to make this all in one cut without any relief cuts, we're trying to take a square blade and make a circular cut, and that's not going to work out very well. We're going to either break the blade or get really poor quality cuts. Notice that relief cuts, they come just about to my line. They don't actually touch the line. We really want to get into that habit of not actually cutting on the line. We want to leave the line so we have something to sand to. This is going to do the cutting. This does not do the sanding. To do the sanding, we'll use a sander for that. So we only want to get about a 1/16 away from the line, not actually all the way up to the line. For whatever reason, number 8 vanished. Number 9, if anything looks unusual, the blade is out of adjustment, get me. Show me. Let me fix it for you. I don't want you having to use a machine that's not working properly. Sometimes, some of you probably can't see this, but this wheel is coated with a rubber material, and sometimes little chunks of that rubber go missing, and the blade starts to go da-doom, 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 and it vibrates. Kind of like a washing machine that's out of balance that dances all around your laundry room. The same thing can happen here. If that happens, let me know. I want to fix it. I don't want to leave you guys using a machine that's not working properly. Number 10, do not feed stock into the bandsaw too quickly. This will dull or break the blade. And it's dangerous if your hand slips off the wood being cut. We don't want to do anything fast in here. We want to let the machine do the work, and we're going to be there slowly using it. The bandsaw is wonderful. You can go as slow as you want to. Generally speaking, the slower you go, the more accurate the cut is that you're making. So go nice and slow. Don't worry about winning the race. Don't worry if there's a few people behind you. Go slow and get the job done right. Number 11, do not talk to anybody while cutting on the bandsaw. We're not worried about who you have in Assassins. We're not worried about who you're taking to prom. We're not worried about anything other than what you're doing right now. That stuff distracts you, and you're either going to make a poor cut or you're going to cut yourself. Number 12, if you need to back out of a cut, shut off the machine first. When I say back out of a cut, let's say I want to cut this right down the middle. I get to right here, and I realize, uh-oh, I'm cutting in a spot I don't want to cut. Please turn the power off on the saw before you back out. Otherwise, this acts like a derailleur on a mountain bike. I'm sure you've all ridden a mountain bike. When you shift the gears, it's that little banana-shaped thing in the back, gently guides the chain up or down a gear. And because you're spinning, it doesn't hardly have to move. It just slowly moves the chain. The same thing happens here. When I back out, it puts a little pressure on the back side of the saw blade, and as we pull, that blade comes off the tracks. And this one is almost a brand new one. On an older one, you'll see marks inside that you can see where the blade has come off and cut the inside of the bandsaw casing. It's not the end of the world if that happens, but we want to check the blade to make sure it's not super dull, because it's not a metal cutting blade and now it's trying to cut metal. So it's not terrible. Let me know if it happens, but we want to avoid that from happening by just turning off the power. The one exception to that rule is relief cuts. Because relief cuts are usually short and straight, we don't have to worry about them pulling the blade off. There's just not enough time, there's not enough pressure for it to do that. So don't worry about it when it comes to relief cuts. 13, if the blade is dull, see the instructor to get a new blade. A dull blade is dangerous to use. Why is a dull blade dangerous? Yeah.
Because you're putting in more effort to get that same cut, so you're pushing more, and it could cause it to slide into your finger faster.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to push harder if it's dull. It's like using a dull knife to cut something apart. You've got to push a lot harder on it. And your finger is not nearly as hard as a piece of wood, so the harder you push, you're going to slip off eventually, and you're not going to be able to stop your momentum, and you're going to hit the blade. So you're much better off having a nice sharp blade on there that you don't have to push too hard on. And that's really for any tool in the shop. 14, never attempt to remove a piece of wood that is near the blade when the blade is running. We do not want that to happen. That's when people get hurt. They reach in to grab a little piece. Those of you with OCD that don't like the little pieces of wood sitting on top of the tabletop, you're just going to have to live with it for a few minutes. And then, after, yeah, you can blow it off. You can grab a scrap piece of wood and knock it off. But it bothers me too. I understand exactly what you're feeling. It drives me nuts when there's little pieces of wood sitting on top of the tabletop. Deal with it. It's better that than little pieces of fingertips on the tabletop. So let it stop before you take that stuff off. And then 15. The teeth on the blade should point down. If the teeth on the blade are pointing up, it's in backwards, and it's not going to cut your board. It's just going to leave little black burn marks on your board. Questions? What I'm going to do now is demo a couple relief cuts. You'll see that, and what I want you to look for is how quickly I move. How quickly I move.
Let's see.
I wish that I was transparent, but I am not there yet.
Okay.
Are you saying that because I'm excessively fat and you're making fun of me for my size?
No.
You're mean.
Oh. I didn't say that.
So you can see those relief cuts go right up to the line, but they don't actually touch the line. The relief cuts go almost to the line. Now when I make my cut, It's just a series of short